Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home.
I came to Sapelo a few years ago. The community really just took me in. I had been wild foraging before I got to Sapelo, so it had always been like a community practice for me. I was able to understand that herbalism was like really a part of culture. I used to teach at Savannah State, and I remember I told my students culture is related to language. So what's your culture? And these are Black students from rural South. Half of them are like, I don't have no culture. So that's problematic. You know, they think their culture is just violent. So then I had to sit with them and talk about, oh, do you remember what your grandmother used to do with you? Do you remember what y'all did at those church picnics? Do you remember those different things? That is your culture, and being able to identify that. When you're making a sweetgrass basket, you're connected to that first person who was pulling that palmetto, who was pulling that grass, who was conceiving that. You're now connecting yourself to that lineage and to that cultural memory. So I think, you know, those are things that are needed for a person to be able to sustain themselves as a human. And then I have magnolia. It's just my favorite tree. The flower and the bark is really good to help with anxiety. So like relieving depression. There are actually so many herbs that are antidepressant and so many trees that are antidepressant. So I just think it's such a beautiful thing. And they also say put it under your bed, the leaves under your bed. Your husband won't, have no problem.
Well, I've got to tell you the story about how I met my husband. I went to South Carolina Coastal Community Development Corporation. There was a gentleman there that was the manager. And I didn't know at the time that he was a chef, renowned chef, Bill Green from James Island. So I asked him, I said, Bill, do you think you would teach the kids how to grow the food that we harvest? And he said, I would love to. I was waiting for you to ask me. So I said, wow, we're on a roll now. So we started our first Gullah cooking class. That's what I want to see with the food and justice movement, that people take more time to know where their food comes from, who is producing their food, and what are they putting in their food, the product, before they get to them.
My name is Bill Green. I was raised up north of here on a little island called James Island, this north of here. And we raised up living alongside the creeks and the farms and the woods. So I learned how to do all three of them things with some of the main things that I was raised up with. I was raised up know how to go out in the creeks and fish, raised up knowing how to farm, and raised up knowing how to hunt. The Gullah food ways and what I was taught is knowing exactly the different herbs that you use to cook with, and cooking it and being able to cook it thoroughly and have it where, when you taste it, that's what you really want. The minute you smell them, you take one taste, you start smiling. So the nickname for my food anyway is smiling food. You're supposed to be able to taste and know what you're eating. And you got to have that 5 sense. You got to be able to look at it, and you got to be able, you could hear it when it's cooking, you could smell it. Man, when you taste it, then your taste buds go crazy. So you take a 5 of your sense to really cook a good pot anyway. But if you got any kind of doubt or any kind of problem or something, you need to stay away from the pot. Don't go to try to cook nothing for nobody unless your heart in the right place. Your spirit in the right place in your heart, and all that go right on through your food to cook the Gullah way.
Black folks were reluctant to use the term Gullah. And I can't remember how we eventually came back to this is what's going to be, because that's who we are. I had been writing plays for, my church and for my students for years. So we started it actually at my home church, which was First African Baptist Church, founded in 1863, the church that Robert Smalls was a founding member. Who is Aunt Pearlie Sue, and why do you do what you do? Well, I was the co-founder of a group called the Hallelujah Singers. And Marlena and I, for 10 years together, writing plays that highlighted Gullah culture. We were practicing and performing out of that church. And then we eventually found a building that needed renovations. And so we needed a fundraiser, so Marlena came up with this concept of a musical salute tribute to Mahalia Jackson. And so we called that Hallelujah Mahalia. And with that, the Hallelujah Singers was born. We were the musical gospel group in the movie Forrest Gump. And the music was recorded in that church. And I can remember telling the singers, because I was the assistant artistic director at the time, I said, I'm going to Hollywood. And I said, girl, you so crazy. Next thing you know, Tom Zemeckis and then we're sitting at First African Baptist Church. And so when I left that group, I left Auntie Sue there, and I became Aunt Pearlie Sue. And so a lot of stuff that I do now as Gullah Traveling Theater and the Gullah Kinfolk were plays that I wrote to engage my students, to teach them history. And I didn't want history to just be something that was boring, but I wanted it to come alive. I have students that are now 50 years old, and I'll be in the grocery store and I had somebody say, shake 'em, shake 'em. And I'm like, you as old as you still shaking? Yeah, Miss Peter, Miss Aunt Pearlie Sue, I remember that song.
That's what we're able to do with the art at the museum, to go frame by frame, picture by picture, artist by artist. And we look at the colors and we laugh and we cry. We contemplate the stories behind the people that we see. The Beach Institute is a wonderful place. The Beach Institute is owned by the King Tisdale Cottage Foundation. A foundation started by Mr. Law in 1979. Officially 1981. Mr. Law, W.W. Law, Wesley Wallace Law is one of the key leaders of the civil rights movement here locally in Savannah. Mr. Law, for about 40 or 50 years, shaped the civil rights movement here in this area, a nonviolent movement through the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and he was a trainee of a man named Dr. Ralph Mark Gilbert, who was pastor of First African Baptist Church. And in the 1930s and 40s, Dr. Gilbert went all throughout Georgia setting up NAACP chapters, which was kind of the precursor. This was before the hot part of the civil rights movement got started. And when Dr. Gilbert moved on, Mr. Law stepped into the leadership. And he carried this movement for about 26 years as the leader of the local chapter of the NAACP. When he stepped down from the leadership in 1976, he began to preserve the history that he had just been making. And so he created 3 museums. The King Tisdale Cottage, it was owned by an entrepreneurial family called the King family and the Tisdale family. And these are families that were entrepreneurs in the 1920s. And then 10 years later, the foundation acquired the Beach Institute. The Beach Institute is the first school building built by African Americans in Savannah for the purpose of celebrating the education of our own children. As I like to say, it's a FUBU school, for us, by us, built by free black people. No enslaved people built that building. And the foundation acquired that building in 1989. Mr. Law created a 3rd museum called the Dr. Ralph Mark Gilbert Civil Rights Museum, which is located on Martin Luther King Drive. And that museum tells the story of the Savannah Civil Rights Movement. And so those 3 museums Mr. Law started, and I've had the distinct responsibility of being in the leadership of management of all 3 museums.
So King Street meant a lot for the African American community. This is the Gullah Museum. When I originally heard about the Gullah Museum, it was located in Paulus Island, South Carolina. And I always would see this gentleman sitting outside under this tree every day. So I stopped by one day. I'm like, hey, what is this? He's like, it's a museum. So I went in, and he had quotes and sewing machines, and I'm a history buff. So I just had a good time just paying attention. Not realizing I went to school with his daughters, you know, and they moved it down here, and I just come to the museum, help them out, kind of look around, just get education on different things, pick up books and literature, reading about the history of the Gullah Geechee community in this area, because a lot of times people kind of skip over Georgetown on the coastal highway.
My name is Beatrice Rodriguez. My parents founded the Gullah Museum in Georgetown, South Carolina in 1997. They founded it because they wanted to make sure that people were educated about the Gullah Geechee and to preserve our culture. And that is pretty much is what we do here at the museum. My mother was a quilter, so at our museum we do feature story quilts. Our story quilts all have a connection to the Gullah Geechee people, and some of them have connection to Gullah Geechee people here in Georgetown, South Carolina.
My favorite piece right now is our Harriet's husband, and it has so many connections to Georgetown because we picture Georgetown in it with this house right here. And the reason why that house is in this quilt is because it's the home of James Bawley. And James Bawley was actually one of the first people that Harriet Chamberlain rescued. And she rescued him, and she felt, because she was not educated, she made sure that he got educated. And as an adult, during Reconstruction, James Bawley moved to Georgetown, South Carolina. He was on the board of state government, and he also was on the board of trustees of the University of South Carolina during Reconstruction. That is why we love Harriet Tubman here, not just because of her work as an underground conductor, but because she had impact here.
I think it's a remarkable way that Mr. Law has incorporated art because it's almost a kind of innocent way of telling the story. If you show up a piece of art, and this is artist Jonathan Green, who was a remarkable Gullah Geechee artist, and his art is, again, beautiful, is joyous. It's a lot of great pieces in here. And so we can tell our stories about Gullah Geechee life. A lot of the images you see are on the water. You see magnificent colors. So in one way, it's very enjoyable. But as you begin to look at some of the backstories, what is this woman? What is this event here? Or sometimes you'll see an image of a laundress. That is such a big part of our story because so many of our people were laundresses. And their work, midwives, their work as the fishermen and crabbers and these kind of things. All of these little simple everyday slices of our life tells a great, beautiful, complete story of our lives and our contributions. It takes me right back to my great-grandmother, who's from South Carolina. And she grew up here in Georgia, and she's working, she's a laundress, and she's working for certain families and washing their clothes on a weekly basis. And this is not a thing where you take the laundry and throw it into a machine and hit a button and drop one of the pods in. No, this is the tub, this is boiling the water, this is getting the washboards, and this is dirty, hard work. You gotta clean up laundry. She did not know, because they were so independent, she did not know it was depression in the 1930s until white folks asked her for credit. So we look at the washwoman, this poor lady doing all of this work, but she's independent. She's free.